Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Bismillah, salatu wassalam, ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Today I would like to talk about a very important topic, which is doubts surrounding the rights of women in Islam. It's a very important topic. A lot of people misunderstand it, a lot of people misrepresent it. So I would like to share the following with you. The first part of it is what the enemies of Islam, or some people who may misunderstand Islam, say that things that violate the rights of women in Islam. The following is what I could remember. Firstly, the hijab, the covering that the woman must use to cover her body and hair and also the face. So they say that this of course restricts the freedom of the woman, and it doesn't give her choice in relation to what she can wear and what she cannot wear. So the following is a very short and brief response to that. First of all, anyone who engages in any activity or in any profession or in any sport or is a citizen of any country, they must abide by the rules and the regulations of that organization, country, sport or activity. So for example, a person who engages in, let's say, swimming, he or she wears things appropriate for swimming. If they engage, for example, in medicine, as like a doctor or a nurse, they wear clothing that is appropriate for that given profession. If they're a citizen of a certain country, of course they follow the rules set by that country. So they can't turn around and say, for example, a doctor, actually my rights are violated, I don't feel that I'm respected, I don't want to wear anything, I want to run around the hospital in whatever clothes I wish. Of course, everyone would be upset, even the patients, the workers, the boss, everyone. And they would probably request him to leave, or her. So for that reason, it's very unreasonable to expect a Muslim woman who is supposed to cover herself, for the following reasons, I will explain why, to wear something that is not corresponding to her religion. So first of all, she must not be seen by everyone and anyone, especially people who desire her. And most men, if not all, they desire women, especially if they can see her parts of the body. Whether she is beautiful or not for some, she may be beautiful for some others. So therefore, her hair is a source of beauty, her whole body. The Prophet ﷺ said that the woman as a whole, she is awra. Awra means something that not everyone can see, only her husband. So that is the main reason that she must be concealed. And of course, anything and anyone who is considered to be important, people try to protect it. Another thing that people level at Islam is the fact that a man is allowed to marry more than one wife. And of course, anyone who understands that women and men are different. So for example, a woman cannot have more than one husband for very obvious reasons. First of all, she is weaker than men. Generally, of course, someone who doesn't believe that, he must be from another planet who has just landed on Earth. On Earth, women are generally weaker than men, physically and emotionally and psychologically. That's why all armies, I'm not saying most, all armies of the world, probably 99% consist of men. And of course, she has her menstrual cycle every month. She cannot live with two men. She can barely live with one. Plus, in Islam, the man must work and provide. So she cannot provide for both of these men while she can barely provide for herself. And there are a host of other reasons why it is not at all reasonable. One of them being that the man will have a dispute as to who fathered a child if she has a child. And of course, it's not at all reasonable normally. And it benefits the whole community, because in Islam, Allah looks and Islam looks at the benefit of the whole community. Generally, women outnumber men at all times, especially after wars and after social strife and things like this. So for that reason, it's allowed. And it's not, of course, a condition like some people say that you must have certain conditions in order to do it. No. He can have 4 wives and marry them on one day. He can have them for the fact that he likes it, as Allah said in the Quran. So it's not correct to twist what the Quran says just to please someone who doesn't like Islam anyway. So, and of course a believing woman accepts all of this. She doesn't go against Islam, against Quran, against Allah. Even if she is the first wife, she may be upset at the beginning, but later on she will understand it. And of course it benefits the other women who may not be able to get married otherwise. They may have certain circumstances. So that is a brief answer. Another issue is the amount of inheritance that is given to the lady is half of that given generally to the man. And of course that's not always the case, first of all. Secondly, when it is the case, then of course it's because the man is supposed to be spending. And before I go that, I've just remembered that in the issue of wives, the man must be just to everyone. He must provide them with living space. He must look after them financially, emotionally, divide his time between them equally, and so on. So it's a huge responsibility. So in relation to the inheritance, the reason the man is given double the amount that a woman is given is because, of course, he must spend and spend and spend. So from the very beginning until the very end, he must spend. So for that reason, very, very briefly, for that reason, he's given that. Another thing that people level is that the woman must have a wali, a male guardian, normally the father, to get married, or that she must have a mahram, a male relative whom she cannot marry, like the father, her grown-up son, her brother, not cousin, or uncle, for example, to travel. And of course, generally when people are wealthy or influential, they sometimes get to be called VIPs, very important persons or people. And of course, they have their bodyguards, they have people assisting them to open the door, to close the door, to bring this, to take that, and so on. So this is considered to be a dream life for VIPs or for any person who is aspiring to be a VIP. As for the Muslim lady, when people look after her, represent her interests, for example, in the case of the wali, when getting married, everyone would be very happy if someone very professional represents her interests, or their interests rather, on important occasions in life. But just because they can't afford it, most people can't afford it really, they cannot do it. But we have, alhamdulillah, someone who is much better than a lawyer, her father, who represents her interests when getting married, when mistakes can occur, when people can cheat one another, and this does happen often when there is no representative. Or when she travels, all her needs are taken care of. So it's a very strange situation where people say that it's restricting her. As for the fact that she must ask for permission of her wali, her guardian or mahram, to be traveling, then of course this everyone, you know, when you travel, do you just travel and you leave everyone, you don't tell anyone, you don't seek their advice or even sometimes their blessing, as they say, their permission? So this is a very strange argument that people give. Another thing that some people say is that her testimony is half of that of the man. First of all, it's not always the case. And it is true that in some cases it is half, and Allah mentioned the reason in the longest ayah in the Quran, in the longest verse, when He said that if one of them two forgets, then the other will remind. And also in some cases her testimony is not accepted at all because she is emotional, she can be bullied and intimidated. And it's just too dangerous for her, for example, in cases of murder, zina, fornication, and so on, where it is just too dangerous for her to give testimony. But in other cases, and also she is emotional, she may not be able to bear the stress. Also, in some cases, only her testimony is accepted, not men. Like, for example, childbirth, the length of her pregnancy, things to do with her. Also, people level accusations towards Islam in relation to her remaining in the house. And of course, it's very simple to explain it. If she is the wife and the husband and the mother, or even if she's a daughter in the house of her family, then she's learning to be a mother and a wife. Then, of course, she has one of the most important jobs in the world, and that is making sure that the home is really a cozy home, a lovely home where the husband and children can relax and have an accomplished family life. So therefore she is best suited to be that person and to look after the family, to provide the husband with strong family ties, to cook, to clean. Why would someone want another woman to come and look after the children when she is not their mother and she's not the wife of the husband? And of course, for that, the husband is supposed to provide her needs, not just be at home, or like some people advocate for her to work outside during the day and in the evening to be looking after the house, doing two jobs, and that is of course unfair. Also, people say, why is it that it's not allowed in Islam to mix, for men and women to mix freely and to study or work freely mixed in a mixed environment? Of course, nowadays we have lots of cases of sexual harassment, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. We have huge problems with that. And of course, the fact that the woman cannot relax, she's constantly being harassed. The other day I read an article in a well-known global newspaper in which they said that girls as young as 9 are being harassed at school, sexually harassed. So, of course, it continues to college, to university, to the workplace, and a lot of ladies, a lot of women, they do not want to report the sexual harassment, as we have seen for the past 2-3 years with high profile cases. So that is the main reason why, and of course it has a negative impact on the character of the man and the woman, especially the woman who loses her shyness, and being shy in Islam is very important even for the man. Also, people say, why is it that it's not allowed that people have sexual relations before marriage? And of course, this is said by people who don't have almost any honor or decency, even though, of course, they portray themselves as the flag bearers of decency around the world and honor and so on, and they think themselves to be very well respected. It's obvious that if a father wouldn't want his daughter to be having sexual relations with every person in the street, but that's what people advocate. They say they want the person not to be punished, not to be so that the father doesn't even know where she is any time of day or night, which normally leads to sexual predators. How many cases do we hear almost every single week, maybe, or month, of young ladies at the beginning of their lives being savagely raped and murdered by people because she went outside, she went clubbing, she went whatever, and generally it happens during the night most of the time. So in Islam it's not allowed. We honor our commitments to family, to our religion. We protect the honor of men and women. We protect the lineage, meaning that we know the father of the child, the mother of the child. We protect the family, and this of course destroys families. Nowadays people talk about open marriages in many countries, so meaning that the husband and wife can sleep with anyone, then they come together and as if they are a family. They talk about polyamory, they call it, which is one person living with 2 or 3 sexual partners in the house. Of course, they don't talk about marriage, because marriage is such a bore and such, and so on and so forth. The institution of the family is slowly getting denigrated and destroyed. Of course, a very well-known personality used to live, and he used to be the founder of a very well-known magazine. I think he's dead now, but he was very well known around the world to be living with a number of young, beautiful ladies. No one used to say anything. So how is that respecting, of course, the rights of those women? He didn't have any obligations, just like we have, for example, in Islam, in terms of sharing time, sharing financial responsibilities, and things like this. So people, I don't remember anyone actually criticizing him or criticizing them, the ladies. The second part, I want to remind of the condition of the woman with those who claim that they have emancipated her and they have freed her. And if you analyze the condition of the woman around the world, and in those countries in particular, you will find that the woman is being taken advantage of on all levels, financially, physically, sexually, and she's been exploited even in the workplace, where she very often does the same job as the men, and she gets paid much less. And this is a problem that exists in all countries around the world. Crimes against women are much more prevalent than against men. Like I said about sexual harassment, a huge number of what in English is called illegitimate children. They're trying to legitimize it, and of course factually, de facto, they have legitimized it. De jure, meaning in law, they want to legitimize it as well, and I think they have done it, where people give birth, ladies give birth, out of wedlock. And of course no one cares. Most of people, they don't know their fathers, sometimes even their mothers. The fathers may say that it's not my child, so therefore there's no one to look after him financially, this child, or even bring them up. So the state is forced to foot the bill and look after them. They grow up without knowing their father, and like I said, sometimes even their mother. There is a huge level of loneliness, and the lonely women, and the proportion of lonely women is only growing, because as soon as she reaches a certain age, she's no longer desirable, because she is only treated as a sexual object, and anyone who thinks otherwise is actually not following the real world. So for that reason, even though we have a great number of lonely men, but generally lonely women are much more in number. And generally, like I said, when they reach a certain age, no one is interested in them. The institution of the old woman or the mother, or you can say maybe a pensioner woman, is not really that high, meaning that it's not well respected. They make jokes about them, and as soon as the lady or a lady reaches the age of 40, unless of course she's very wealthy and famous and so on, but I'm talking about general normal women, she's no longer desirable as a general rule. Whereas if she is married, and especially happily married with children, of course she is desired by the husband, by the children, and in Islam we have a huge responsibility to look after the mother. So these are some of the things that I have thought of mentioning, and in concluding, I would like to say a few things. First of all, that anyone who wants to study Islam or anything must be impartial and follow the facts, and must understand that the woman is created different to the man, and of course her requirements are totally different in many areas, and also the fact that Allah does not wrong anyone. He is the creator. He knows what to give the woman, what not to give. Finally, I would like to remind that throughout history, until Islam came about more than 1400 years ago, women were oppressed, and they were not given the even rights to inherit anything, let alone half of what the man inherits. She didn't have almost any rights. In Christianity sometimes, and it's well documented, they used to have conferences entitled, "Is the woman a human being?" So one side would present arguments that she is, and one side would present arguments that she is not, and these would be Christian scholars. Until very, very recently, the woman in so-called developed countries didn't even have the right to vote. She didn't have the right to own property. Many other things. For example, in many countries who are lecturing now us about human rights, and especially rights of the woman, the black citizens of their country, they didn't have a right even to be on the same bus or in the same post office as the white citizens of the same country. So this is very recent. And of course the treatment to indigenous populations and the terrible fate of those people is very well documented and is slowly coming out. The scale of the atrocities, and you can even say the genocide committed against the indigenous populations around the world is terrible. So did that happen in the history of Islam? Of course it did, but not on that scale, and not that people would generally fight themselves. And of course the woman was always respected. She had rights enshrined in the Quran, in the Sunnah of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whereas women in the West and other countries, non-Muslim countries, they didn't have almost any rights. In many Western countries, the woman was not even supposed to enjoy sex, and this is very recently. So these things I want to mention. Why? Because they have, when we compare, we must understand history and we must understand the context. So this is what I wanted to mention. We hope that, and I hope that anyone who wants to know more about Islam, they will learn Islam. They will not take it from the enemies of Islam and those people who ought to misrepresent Islam. And so thank you for watching. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum.